Hello everyone, and welcome to Slow Textiles Group Textile Talks. I'm delighted to introduce woven textile designer Kirsty Brabin today, who's going to be talking about her beautiful woven textiles, mostly that she's been creating whilst based in the Shetland Isles and in Scotland. So if we start maybe, Kirsty, by you just telling us a bit about your work and how you became involved with Scottish textiles.
Yeah, of course. So as you mentioned, I'm a woven textile designer specialising primarily in woolens and tweeds. Um, Up until about 2 weeks ago, I worked for a company called Alexanders of Scotland, which is based in Aberdeenshire. I left the position to prepare for my move back to Shetland so I can work full time on my own collections and developing my own business. And I'm hoping to launch my collection in September next year, so about 18 months from now. So a lot going on at the moment, a lot of research and a lot of sampling happening. So it's a very exciting time for me. I'll probably start from the beginning. My sort of infatuation with Shetlands began, and with its beautiful woolens, began at the start of 2013, and I've recently completed a bachelor's degree, again specialising in woven textile design at Chelsea. And like many graduates, I set about discovering my next challenge, and I applied for Global Yell's annual Weaver in Residence post. Global Yell is a charity based in Shetland, and they educate everything to do with weave and other aspects of textile design as well. So I went to the residency, which was funded by the Paul Hamlin Foundation, and I got to stay there for 4 months working to an industrial brief to create a product for the charity. And I moved to Yell, which is a tiny North Isle to Shetland's main isle, and there's about 1,000 people living there. And at this point, I'd never been to Shetland before, nor did I know much about their weaving heritage. So it was a fantastic journey for me. Global Yell received its equipment from the Anne Sutton Foundation. So the charity's still very involved with Anne, and she's still very much involved in what goes on with the charity. And the creative director, Andy, visits her often to let her know of the goings on still. When I moved to Shetland, I was quite apprehensive about the new adventure, but very excited. Prior to living in Shetland, I hadn't really used wool much before. Wool's a very dominant fibre in Shetland, so it was good to use a yarn that I'd not really used before. I did experiment with wool a little during my bachelor's degree, but I'd never created a large project or worked to an industrial brief on the scale that I did working at Global Yell. So it was a very interesting time, and as I was there, I understood the process more of working to a brief, which has definitely put me in stead for setting up my own business, and put me in a very good stead for my master's degree as well. My master's degree was very much an organic continuation of the research that I began in Shetland, especially to do with the local people, how they are quite patriotic about wanting to revive the woven textile industry, and also seeing how us purchasing wool and using wool helps people on those islands, smaller communities, more rural communities. And it gave me a really interesting first-hand view on how important wool is to the British society and the textile industry in this country. So
Okay, brilliant. So perhaps you'd like to can you show us a few images of you working? What's the name of the island where you were? Mostly at Yale.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
Will you show us a few images of you working
Of course.
now?
So this is a picture of me at the centre. They've got 4 looms there. These larger size ones are the ones that I worked on with 24 shafts. I'll just get you the other photos up.
What's the name of the centre again? Is it just Global
It's
Yell?
called Global Yell. It was previously called ASF Shetlands, which was Anne Sutton Foundation, but now it's called Global Yell.
Okay.
And I've got a photo here. This is quite an inspiring photo to me. So I looked at the colours a lot in Shetland, and not just the really obvious colours like green and blue and the really clear things you can see in the photos, but the odd bits of red and the yellow on the rocks. So a lot of the work that I did while there, and a continuation again into my master's degree, was to look a little bit more closely and look at the hidden coast. So I was paying attention to I suppose a lot of the colours that you wouldn't usually pick up on. And weave is such a fabulous thing where you can sort of use one or two picks, a flash of colour, to create a really beautiful accent and an injection of, I suppose, more of a more dynamic palette. Here's a close-up of one of my wovens. This was a blanket. Once it came off the loom, I blanket stitched it, and this was a blanket that was in my final collection. So I had 3 blankets and an upholstery piece for my final master's degree collection. I can show you a photo also of fabric that I woven for the charity, and this was one of 2 7-metre pieces. This was used as upholstery fabric, and the 2 finished chairs were exhibited in September just in 2014 at Alexandra Palace in London. So that was part of an exhibition there, and part of Global Yell, I suppose Global Yell showcasing to the rest of the UK what Shetland really does have to offer in terms of woven textile design.
Yeah, so the charity is actually really important in promoting new emerging designers, isn't it? Using
Yeah,
their local yarns.
yeah, I'd say very much so. The charity it's an absolutely fabulous place, and anybody can go and use the equipment. There's a lot of new designers, young designers, recent graduates who the equipment's accessible to. And they don't just have looms, they've got a fantastic library as well, and also Andy Ross, the creative director, who's extremely knowledgeable and enthusiastic regarding textiles in Shetland. So there's lots of different things going on at Global Yell that's accessible to not just people in the UK, but people globally. They have residents there from Bulgaria and America, so they really do a lot of work globally and not just within the UK, which I find quite important to, I suppose, showcase globally what Shetland has to offer. So.
Mm. I was caught by some of your lovely slides that it's interesting that the inspiration photo you showed us, the colours really match the weaves that
Yeah.
were inspired by it. Yet there's a really quite a geometric modernist feel in the actual final blankets, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, a lot of the shapes and I suppose the way I sort of, I guess, portray, I suppose, change in my mind the way I saw the shapes that I created. They were geometric shapes, and a lot of them were based on Neolithic settlements in Shetland. So there's a really big Neolithic settlement that's south of Shetland, which is called Jarlshof. And a lot of the shapes that I created were, I suppose, aerial views of the settlement. So that's why you've got these sort of blocky, I suppose, quite geometric shapes. And I suppose that it has got a more contemporary element. So, I mean, what I really wanted to do was, even though I'm very interested in tweeds and Shetland tweeds, what I didn't want to do was just recreate a tweed. I wanted to create something a little bit more different, a bit more contemporary. I didn't want to just reproduce the same old tweed that we've seen before. I wanted to create something a little bit more edgy. The the weaves as well that I did were double cloth weaves as well, so it gave, I suppose, a bit more of a variation, and depending what side that you looked on, you've got a very reversible, quite contemporary fabric.
Will you show us the one that's tempting us just behind you?
Yeah, of
Will you bring?
course. So from the slide that I shown you just a moment ago, which was a close-up, this was one of the final blankets off the loom, and this was a finished piece that was involved in my master's degree exhibition. As you can see there, there's a lot more grey on the other side. So I think that's the beauty of double cloth, that you can really play with shape and colour and get these really interesting outcomes.
Yeah.
On the blankets, the 3 blankets that I created were those sorts of reversible fabrics. And then on the chair, the upholstery piece I created, and I used a type of weave called piqué. So what I actually did was, giving reference to tweeds, is I put a twill in the piqué. So piqué is this sort of quilted fabric you can see here, and it's actually quite a 3D fabric. If you look at it in the light, you can see the sort of shapes in piqué. And this was the final fabric was on the chair. So you can see there, you can see the sort of twills like sort of entwined into the piqué, which I really love the effect of. A little bit more closely, it looks a little bit like sort of rope, sort of curving around the shapes, which I loved because obviously I was so close to the sea at all times, and I suppose the fishing industry as well in Shetland. So you can see it a little bit better here because you can, the colours.
Still. Hold it still. I'm just going to take a photo.
Yeah, sure.
Brilliant. Okay. That's so beautiful, Kirsty. It's so depthful, isn't it? And rich. It's got such a.
I've got another example. This is a little bit more. This is a little bit more sort of bright and edgy, but this was straight from a photograph, which was quite fun. So you can really see the sort of the shapes of the settlement. The colour is the sort of shapes of the layout of the settlement at Jarlshof, which was really fun to do. So I'd just go to the sites and I'd be sketching all the shapes, and it was really fantastic to walk around and see where the kitchen would have been and see where the stove would have been, and the rock formations that are still there from these old settlements. They're quite fascinating, and I've obviously been there for a very long time, and that was quite an inspiring aspect. So it wasn't just colour that motivated me. It was, I suppose, Shetland historically as well, and also the history of the tweed industry, and like I said before, the sort of patriotic locals there who are trying to revive and sustain this. And I began to, I suppose, understand the importance of preserving community identity and traceability. So I wanted to find a way where I could infuse my passion for Shetland's landscape, but also with the weaving heritage and I suppose the people of Shetland also. So
such a lovely story, because you've made beautiful designs and beautiful objects, right? We'll see in a minute Kirsty's beautiful pieces of furniture that she's upholstered with her weaves. You've got this really ancient line to antiquity and Neolithic communities in the region, and then you've got all your current contemporaries, your friends who you've made there, and also the traditions and concerns of their local community in relation to sheep farming, wool production, commerce. So, and then you're injecting your own contemporary look to all that rich mix into something really special. It's really lovely.
Thank you.
And the colours are so evocative as well, like you said, to move away from the traditional patterns, but of course you've got probably quite traditional colours, I guess, in there, but your interpretation really fresh and modern.
The colours, it's very interesting with the colours actually, because I got all of my yarn from Shetland's only mill. I wanted to make it a sort of 100% Shetland cloth, so I was sort of weaving it there, and I was buying the woolen yarns from there, and it was so interesting to visit Jameson's mill, which is in Sandnes, which is on the main Shetland Isle, and it's fantastic to go there, and the colour ranges that they've got are just so fabulous, and you can tell that they pay such close attention to their own landscape when creating these shades, because they're almost matched. I was almost able to colour match with the photos that I'd taken, and I only had to hand dye myself a few different shades of yarns, because most of them were already there, because the dyers there had paid such close attention to their own landscape and the inspiration around them, that it was just a really I suppose a really beautiful journey to interact with people who live there, as well as doing a project considering there. It felt sort of, I suppose, cradle to grave process, that everything I did was in Shetland and to do with Shetland and promoting Shetland's weaving industry, which was, I think, quite important at my degree show, that the whole process had happened there.
And how do you say it's affected your work? Because obviously only 2 or 3 years ago there was Kirsty Brabin Textile, sort of pre-Shetland. So has it dramatically changed your look and the idea for your future brand?
Yeah, I'd say it definitely has, and I don't say that I definitely wouldn't have used wool if I'd never have gone to Shetland, because I think probably at some point I would have, but I feel that journey and that process of me being there definitely made me look at wool in a completely different light, because you're seeing people who rely on the purchase of wool for their own livelihood. So it was I suppose, quite a personal experience being there and making friends with people who relied on this industry. So I suppose because I'd had such a close encounter with wool and sheep and that entire industry. I mean, even looking out the bedroom window of the croft that I stayed at for those 4 months, there were sheep everywhere. So, and even when I was weaving sitting on the loom, weaving with my Shetland wool, there were sheep directly out the window behind me. So it was a completely different process, I felt, than to me sitting in my little studio in London, where I was, I suppose, purchasing different yarns such as organic cotton, and I guess yarns that I didn't really have as much of a connection with. So I really feel like that process brought me so much closer to wool in that sense.
Yeah, really interesting. So will you show us a couple more images, because we haven't seen yet your beautiful chairs. So will you show us some of those slides, please?
Yeah, of course. So I'll just pop up a photo for you of this is the evening of my private view for my master's degree, and Andy Ross of Global Yell, the creative director, is there on the right. This is my full, I suppose, complete exhibition. So I've got the 3 blankets there and my chair that's upholstered with the PK weave fabric that I held up for you before.
Wow, yeah, really lovely.
Thank you.
Really nice. And will you tell us a bit about where the original piece of moulded furniture came from? Because I understand, you brought new life to an older piece.
Yeah, when I acquired that chair, I actually bought it from a sort of vintage antique store, and it was the fabric wasn't very nice. It was a sort of murky green fabric, and the wood was a very heavily varnished dark wood. So it was a bit of a labour of love, really. I spent quite a few days sanding it down, hand sanding it also on the curved parts there, and got it straight back to the wood, and then varnished it all. So although I suppose I didn't create the base myself, it did feel like I did a really substantial amount of work on it. So it was really, I suppose, just quite amazing to finally have the exhibition all come together. And it was lovely that Andy came from Shetland to see my exhibition also. That was a great honour. So
And do you know anything about the origins of that chair? Do you know what nationality it was originally? Was it British made or
As far as I'm
Italian?
aware, it was Danish. Which I suppose doesn't completely go with the Shetland theme. I did try to source a piece of furniture from Shetland, but it was just so difficult with the time scale, and also getting that back to London as well, and
Mm.
the upholstery process as well. So I sort of tried to pick something that was quite Nordic looking.
Mm.
Shetland itself has a long history of Nordic influence. So I tried to pick something that I felt was quite Nordic looking. So it still had, I suppose, that emphasis on the pattern that I use, like I said, from the Neolithic settlement. So I did try to have like a story and a narrative to the exhibition itself.
Yeah, it's such a rich, lovely combination, and that kind of modernist Danish and Scandinavian furniture,
Yeah,
it fits really well. I mean, that Nordic link seems to aesthetically just fits, doesn't it?
yeah, definitely, yeah.
And in a way, potentially for your brand or future products, the process of upcycling older pieces that have been sort of seen better days,
Yeah,
it seems to fit really nicely with that kind of mid-century modern
yeah,
aesthetic.
yeah.
Okay, I know there's lots more we can talk about. Maybe just a couple more questions. Um, and people can always, at the end, I'll put a link to your website so people can see lots of uh, more great images and photos of all Kirsty's work. And um, something you'd mentioned to me before was about the place names that I thought were so evocative. And you said that some people, local Shetlanders, could recognise like where there were rockier sources of inspiration in the natural landscape. You had chosen certain sorts of colours,
Yeah.
and people locally could identify where each of your designs was inspired from.
Yeah, I think that was especially so with the fabrics that I created for Global Yell. So the work that I did during my residency, and I created two collections. One was called the Yell collection, the island that I lived on, and one was called the Unst collection. Unst is a beautiful island that's north of Yell again, and it's home of the puffins in the summer, and it's a beautiful rocky landscape, and there's beautiful cliffs there, and these gorgeous pink dots on the landscape of the flowers, and just beautiful injections of colour. Yell itself is, people say, more peaty than Unst. So my Yell collection, I suppose, was quite earthy, quite warm. There was a lot of browns in there, and my Unst collection had more greys in because Unst is more rocky. So a lot of the locals, and even people who were regular visitors to Shetland sort of noticed the difference in the collections because of the tones that I'd used to represent the different landscapes, and it was quite lovely that people recognised that that was what I was trying to go for. So it was nice for me that I felt as though there was some success in the project with people recognising those attributes.
Well, it's almost like full circle, isn't it? Because the local communities who you're trying to support in promoting their traditional livelihoods and lifestyles, they're then able to read your contemporary fabrics and know what parts of their islands inspired which blankets or which samples,
Yeah.
which is lovely.
And
Um,
that's sort of exactly what we're trying to do. It's what I'm trying to do, and it's what Global Yell tried to do as well, is to promote all of these beautiful, positive things that Shetland has to offer, not just with their woven textile industry, but in the knitting industry, the Fair Isle knits, and the yarns as well. So the beautiful, qualities that Shetland yarn has. It's a very durable wool. And yeah, so basically that's what it's all about, trying to promote Shetland in the positive light that it should be.
And I've got just one or two more final questions. I wanted to ask you a bit more about colours, because you mentioned just Jameson's having just all the colours you kind of needed, and because I don't excuse my ignorance, but you know, traditionally the yarn dyeing process of Shetland wools for all sorts of traditional tweeds and weaves, would they have always been the same combinations of colours to do with region? Is
Well,
that, yeah?
from studying the archives, as fashions have in other places in Britain, depending on what was available at the time and also what was in fashion, the archives generally tend to change. So I suppose pre-wartime, the colours were a little bit more dull, there was more browns in there, and then I suppose as dyes as well become, I guess a lot more complex, and technology moves on. The colours definitely improved. It's quite interesting actually seeing the post-war archives in Shetland. Shetland Archives has a fascinating and completely great collection of tweeds and the ledger books, sample books that tweed companies kept in Shetland. And definitely post-war, a lot of the colours brightened up, and I suppose that was a lot to do with, you know, trying to boost morale again and bringing all of these beautiful colours back. So I suppose as fashions change, historically Shetland fabrics and the colour use changed also. Jameson's has been a mill in Shetland for I think over 100 years now. And I can actually show you their colour range now is so in depth, and they've got some absolutely fabulous shades. And this is their shade card, and they've got such a wide range of colours. I'll just quickly show you.
Wow. Yeah.
They've got a huge collection. And they've also got their Shetland Naturals as well, which is sort of straight off the sheep's back. So you can see all those different varieties there.
Keep it still a minute.
Yep.
I'm trying to read them. Mogget, Mooskit.
Yeah, ones such as, yeah, all of these are Shetland sheep names. So they do pay very much, you know, a lot of attention to detail with naming the colours. There's a beautiful shade that I like called Brecon, and I can only assume that's named after the beach there, and it's got this beautiful brown, yellow, mustard mottled tones to it. So I think Jameson's definitely pay a lot of attention to pick out the colours of Shetland, so to speak, and, you know, really create what the landscape has to offer.
That's so beautiful and so interesting. Well, thank you so much, Kirsty.
You're welcome.
I think it's a very exciting space, and I think what you've created and what you're building is really fantastic. And you told me earlier that you and your husband are shortly to move to Shetland to live there. So it sounds like things are just going to evolve, and more beautiful new Kirsty Brabin woolen textiles will appear. So I think what we'll do is put a link to your website so people can contact you and find out more. And what's your Twitter tag if people want to contact you directly?
It's at Kirsty Jean 88. And also, if I could just add as well, Global Yell and myself are collaborating to run some workshops and classes in Shetland over the summer. We're going to be doing lots of different exciting courses and all things that locals and visitors can get involved with. We're also running some classes for Shetland Wool Week, which is a fantastic event to visit, not just for weaving, knitting, felting, spinning, all different creative aspects of Shetland. And we'll be running some classes for Wool Week, which is at the end of September.
That sounds brilliant. And where can we stay when all these visitors from Slow Textiles are going to come?
My house. There's lots of lovely rental cottages and B&Bs on Yell, also on Unst, and a lot of lovely hotels on Shetland's mainland as well. So the events aren't just in Yell; they're throughout Shetland entirely. So we've got lots going on in the island.
Okay, brilliant. And is there like a link to so people can look up Shetland Wool Week? Have they got or should we just point people to your Twitter account and you'll be tweeting the events and things?
Yeah. Shetland Wool Week has, I think we're in the 5th year now of Shetland Wool Week. So, yeah, there's lots of information available online about Shetland Wool Week. I'll be putting some tweets up soon about the classes, but they are at the end of September, so they're confirmed dates for those. So Shetland Wool Week should be very soon. They should be putting some links up as well to the program, the brochure, and also the purchasing section as well. Sorry. So there'll be lots of information up in the next couple of weeks about that.
That's brilliant. 'Cause in September, what with the Edinburgh Festival, I mean, it could be a really nice destination, couldn't it? Do a whole sort of 2-week visit to Scotland and then to the Shetland Isles.
Yeah.
And do lots of lovely things up there.
Yeah. There's always a lot going on in September, and it's a really good time to visit. So especially if you're, I suppose, you're more creatively inclined as well. So
yeah, brilliant. Okay, so thank you so much, Kirsty. Really fascinating, and we look forward to future updates.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, lovely to talk to you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.